Hi, I'm Neil Caden. I'm the Sakai Community Coordinator, and I work for the Apereo Foundation. And this is um, I was hoping this might be a way to get people caught up on some discussions that myself and several people have been having in the community offline about technical documentation. So this has not been going on the larger list yet, and we want to bring this conversation out into the open, do a BOF, see if there's some things we want to make more public, get more people involved, and see if we're heading in the right direction and get support. So it's very, very early stages. There's only been like about three, four, maybe five of us at most who have been having these discussions lately. And so I thought I'd, kind of give a summary or a little bit of a story on where we're at and some potential solutions we could see. And bear in mind that we're not anywhere near actually having a solution. These were from discussions and brainstorms and just what emerged from those online email discussions. So the first thing is, now the discussion was quite nonlinear, and so what I've done is I've tried to draw it together, and so the presentation that I'm giving now may seem like it's just a very linear process. We went through problem definition, solutions, concerns, all those kinds of things. In reality, it was a much more nonlinear discussion, as I think these things tend to be. So I'm just putting it into a more linear, condensed fashion. So one of the things that we discussed is the need for technical documentation and how there's really great support on the Sakai dev list. There's some great resources in the Programmers Cafe. There's some older resources on Confluence as well. That's our wiki space that have gems in them, but people, unless you're fairly experienced, you might not be able to pick those gems out. And I think that it's well known in the community that we would really like to have a canonical place to have documentation, and also we have this big gap between novices, somebody just getting started, all the way up to an advanced level. So how do we bring people further along into Sakai technical involvement and development, mostly through online documentation, and so not having to wait for responses on email lists or go trolling through archives and things like that. So the way we phrase these things is that we would like and the idea, of course, is to have more people involved. Potentially, we spread the load of getting more fixes in, more innovation, more tools, built. We also did discuss somewhat the importance of LTI, and went off a little bit on that tangent, which may not be a tangent at all. That maybe Sakai should become more like a learning management system operating system, which is, and this was one of the solutions, so I guess I'm going to be nonlinear. One of the potential solutions is to make Sakai more of a glue that holds a lot of LTI components together, so that it would be we'd be focusing the technology more on that than making it a very big monolithic kind of learning management system. But that was just one solution. Let me get back to the problems. So we would like a more professional, ordered approach, a friendly approach to new coders. We would like, kind of one cohesive entrance point. So if you're out talking about Sakai and somebody wants to know how do you get started developing it, here's the place you go. We have something like that with the Programmers Cafe, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Might be a good place. We discussed that might really be a good launching place, a good core start of the type of thing that we're looking for. We need the open API that is user commentable and akin to stuff like WordPress.org/phpnet. We really want the nuts and bolts explanation of the Sakai framework. Ideally, we'd have project-level linkage between documentation change and code change. We would like more kind of pathways to talk about bringing in novices, make it easy, fill in all the blanks. Dead links that are on the existing Programmers Cafe, it might be in the Programmers Cafe, or making it more clear, and then where do you go next, and kind of figuring out what those gaps are and filling them in. Developers should have more access to this kind of information all the time, and more access to each other all the time, and not have to trawl through email lists and things of that nature. So the goal should be able to get a reasonably competent developer in Java from no install, no Sakai knowledge, to a working source installation that you can develop with in just like a couple of working days, just using the web documentation with minimal or no questions to the community. And we like the structure, that we see some things in Stack Overflow. While we have concerns about whether that would really work, a Stack Overflow itself might be too difficult to build a community-run Stack Overflow. There might be some concepts from Stack Overflow we can apply in terms of Q&A kind of methodology. So what are some of the solutions that we came up with? I just mentioned before that maybe the future of the Sakai is going to be more focused on being a core for LTI. So maybe developers should focus on LTI. I'm willing to help, do some of the coordination of the effort. Obviously, I can't do all the effort on the documentation myself, and I'm also not sure I'm the right candidate for doing the editing, since I don't have a technical enough knowledge of Sakai to be a competent editor. We'll really need to figure a way for folks who have that knowledge, the folks who are at the top of the hierarchy in terms of Sakai knowledge and expertise, to somehow bring their knowledge down. So, which we know is a really big thing to ask of them, and so I don't think we want to ask that of those people in the community who are really, really knowledgeable, unless we have a really, really solid plan and a way to maintain and flesh out the documentation and make it sustainable. And the idea is that once we get a critical mass of understanding in a friendly form, the community itself can write the rest as they help one another. So I'm going to go down kind of the path, two different paths, and one path is talking about Sakai as it is now, and probably will be for several more years. And the other one is that concept of a Sakai LMS and how that might be a little different. So let's just assume we're going to go with Sakai now and take the documentation that's already in Confluence. It seems like Confluence, for this group, it seemed like we weren't quite at consensus, but possibly Confluence is the right place to start. And we could do a combination of things like have questions posted directly to Confluence and have them answered, and then kind of edit it into a format that will be usable for all. And alternatively, we could have a few volunteers who monitor the dev list for technical questions, and then harvest those questions out into the same kind of thing format in Confluence. So we could start with something like that. We could expand the Programmer's Cafe, as the basis, or we could create a new workspace for tech docs. Some of our concerns are that we would need we'd need an editor. We would need a structure and contributors. So what we're talking about now is focused mostly on the structure, and then we need the people. We need the editor, and we need contributors. And I guess my role could be kind of a pseudo editor and an administrative support, and kind of a community coordinator, and maybe a bottom liner trying to get people who said they're going to follow up, keep on them to meet their commitments. Something like that perhaps would work. So that's kind of one thing. Let me see. If we went down if we went down that path, maybe we could get, if we had that structure, maybe we could get a few of the PMC members in the room with new developers or relatively new developers with strong skill sets, strong Java skill sets, and do the walkthrough and paper and find the gaps and use that as the input to getting this effort started. Maybe that could be the spark plug that gets the movement going. Let's see. So some concerns. Well, if we talk about the LTI path, LTI might not have sufficient levels of integration for all needs. A concern is if we don't do something about documentation, this is LTI or not LTI. If we don't grow the base of knowledge of people who understand Sakai well, then there could be fewer and fewer people to help fix core and help sustain Sakai. We have a concern who will update and maintain the documentation, so we do need some volunteers to make this work. Our concerns in the middle rungs in the community are missing, so there's some reasonable documentation to get you started as a beginning level with Programmers Cafe, but getting beyond that is really tough. A concern is that the community is disparate and relatively free to code and create, and this is both a strength and a weakness, right? It means that people have a lot of freedom to initiate new projects. It also means that they may be alone in maintaining them. So there's a few other things. I'm just kind of reading some of my notes and seeing what I think will be useful to bring into the discussion. So we talked about that. Those are some concerns. Look at some data. So some of the feedback that I'm hearing is that getting started is a fairly pleasant experience because we do have these great conferences. We've got the Programmers Cafe. We've got a really friendly vibe in the community. We've got the list, so if you get stuck in the Programmers Cafe, you can ask, and we've had really good success in getting answers from the experienced members of the community. So that's a really big plus of what we've got now, something we might be able to build on. Let's see. We suspect a lot of the documentation that is needed, it does exist, but it's not easy to find, and it's sporadically updated, and it's not cohesive. So part of the effort might be, culling through Confluence to pull out things and then assessing, which things are still relevant and which aren't. We said one concern is that email lists may actually not be helping our ability to help developers move from novice to advanced as much as we would like. They might be depending a little bit too much on email lists. We talked about Stack Overflow and PHP.NET API being good examples of community-engaged documentation, so we might want to look at the structures of those documentation areas and just see what we can learn from them. So I think that, let's say, we should also remember that visitors to Confluence may have little technical background, so we may want to think as we're building out this technical part of the documentation, we might want it to be very clear where that technical part is and think about, the non-technical part, or is the non-technical part handled completely in a separate way, in a separate place. So that's something we really need to give some thought of. We don't want to conflate the non-technical needs of people coming and just learning about Sakai, and we do have the new Sakai website, sakaiproject.org. That might be the place to send new people get a general overview of Sakai and not get them too deep in the weeds with Confluence. Something to think about. So I think that gives a pretty good overview, and as I mentioned, I'll just go back to the LTI thing a little bit more. If we did go down to LTI, focusing on Sakai being a producer and consumer of LTI primarily, it would be, potentially that could be a somewhat disruptive in the community, but it means that it really reduces the resource requirements to getting engaged in Sakai, because your main thing is learning how to do OAuth and LTI, and you're not tied to a particular platform or a programming language, so it opens that up, so that's another benefit. And you already have the cross-tool communication formalized by the LTI standard, and it would be easier for tool sets to be created by communities, including both for open source and for profit. So there's pros and cons to that, and I think it integrates in with some of the Sakai 11 discussion and some of the discussion about what does the future of Sakai look like. So that's kind of an overview of some of the things we talked about. I hope you get a kind of a sense from this that the story was we had all these kind of discussions. We had two major paths. One path, Sakai as it is now. Another path is Sakai for the future. If we kind of assume Sakai as it is now, how do we fill in the documentation? We've already got a whole bunch of documentation. We've got great knowledge by senior members of the community. How do we leverage their time in a way that's really wise and respectful of their time, and yet actually will help the whole community, including them, by growing the base and filling in that middle layer of Sakai knowledge that we need? and how do we get, kind of the structure and the volunteers and the blessings we need to make that happen. And the other path is, well, what if there's a brand new Sakai? We still run into some of the same issues, but then we're focusing our energy more, towards a future documentation structure versus, filling in the current. Maybe the current, we don't want to spend the effort on that because we want to focus on the new stuff. So that's something we might want to think about as well. Thanks a lot for listening.